Welcome back to the Arsenal Transfer Room, the place for you to get the latest Arsenal transfer news and gossip over the course of this summer. And we are going to be covering today's rumours, gossip, and some of the stuff that came out over the weekend as well, because I was away. And I would just like to say I appreciate the support on the last video, because watching it back in the cold light of day, I do look like I was on some sort of substances. Painkillers and antibiotics, I can assure you that is all it is. I'm still on them, and to be fair, I still feel like I'm in a different dimension, but we're going to get into it. That's why there was no live stream, by the way, today. But I do just have to say the support has honestly been unbelievable. We are now approaching 18,000 subscribers. So if you're not already, if you could go down and subscribe, it's free, and like the video as well. That massively helps me out. But there's lots to get into today. And so we're going to start with, oh, wait, no. Oh, yeah, this screen. Yes, I now have a different screen so that it's bigger, because some of you were pointing out that you could normally not see what was actually on the screen. This was something that came out today. Christian Falk. Now, immediately, I have grasped a handful of salt, because any Bayern Munich outlet tends to do the bidding of Bayern Munich. However, he came out and said Arsenal look to hijack Tottenham's deal for Bayern Munich's Leroy Sane. Now, we spoke about Leroy Sane maybe sometime early last week because he had been linked to Arsenal. Of course, he's available on a free this summer. And at 29 years old, we did the greenery check, and there's a huge amount of greenery. I wouldn't mind it too much if it was a kind of last option, third attacking signing of the summer. Anyway, after that, Tottenham suddenly appeared and were in talks or whatever with Bayern Munich. Now Arsenal look to hijack it. And to be honest, I think this is agent talk / Bayern Munich. I think they're just trying to get this deal done with Bayern. I think he might actually end up staying there. And then they're just using Arsenal and possibly Tottenham through the negotiations. And kind of backing that up, Sky Sports chef said Leroy Sane appears to have been offered to Arsenal, but Arsenal have shown no real interest in signing him. So I wonder again if that's the agent going, well, look, he could go to Arsenal and earn this amount, and Bayern are going, we'll go on then. And Arsenal, as of now, have shown no real interest in signing him. So that's that one. We then had this. This came out from Sami Mokbel today. Now, for me, Sami Mokbel and David Ornstein in the journalism world are the top two. And Sami Mokbel said Sesko has near universal backing at the Emirates, but he will be the more expensive deal. Gyokeres is more economical, but would see the club divert from their longer-term strategy, given Sesko has always been a target. Both deals have been explored. Now, near universal backing is true, from what I understand, and I think had Andrea Berta not come in with his ambition to sign Victor Gyokeres, we would probably have near got the Sesko deal done. I think it had Jason Ato's approval. It had Edu's approval. It had Arteta's approval. It didn't happen last summer, but it sounded like we were close in terms of the financials of it. And so I think it would have happened quite quickly. Then, though, Ato, Edu have both gone. Berta has come in. He wants Victor Gyokeres. We know that. And the more it drags on, I question necessarily the motivation for Andrea Berta to want Victor Gyokeres, whether it is entirely to do with his ability or whether it's to do with people that Berta knows. And the idea that he's more economical may not be even true. It may be a cheaper fee. However, when you factor in the wage demands of Victor Gyokeres, which we've said previously and has been reported previously, could be really high, and then also an agent fee, it might not even be cheaper. And then when you talk about being economical, what's the sell-on value or potential sell-on value? So it's like we've always said, Gyokeres is the short-term win-now option. Sesko is the long-term potential, but you could bring him in and, you know, you don't win again next season, and that's costly. So, you know, I don't think anything has particularly changed. What I do think is that it ends up being Sesko. In my opinion, I think the way it's playing out, I think Sesko is the number one option. Berta is making sure that Gyokeres is there as a backup option. And by the way, that's a very good thing to do. And we'll wait and see how it pans out. I would also say this. If there is a Club World Cup team that may still be interested in Sesko, Chelsea, as an example, were interested in Sesko previously. it would be in Leipzig's best interest to wait for the next 10 days before the Club World Cup to see if Chelsea panic and come back in. Because I do think there may be some of those signings where a Club World Cup team that really have to get it done before the 10th just go, do you know what? We're going to go for it. So it wouldn't surprise me if Leipzig are almost prioritizing conversations with a Chelsea if they were interested at the moment anyway. So, yeah, no real movement on it. I still think Sesko is going to be the guy that we end up getting. And like I've always said, I'm happy either way. Joan Garcia, according to this Montfort Carlos, Arsenal have dropped out of the race to sign Joan Garcia. They do not consider paying Garcia's €25 million release clause appropriate, while David Raya is the first choice of the club. And I don't necessarily disagree. I would have loved him at the club. Like, you know, if you can accumulate the best players in the world, and Joan Garcia has the potential to be one of the best goalkeepers in the world, great. I think it would have been a dream to maybe bring him in and then loan him out. But we missed the boat last summer. And once we missed the boat last summer, I just don't think it was ever going to be viable. You've got, you know, if you're Joan Garcia, you've got Barcelona, who seem like they are going to be the ones that end up signing him. You've got possibly then Newcastle United, Aston Villa. And whilst that not, you know, it's not as desirable as Arsenal, you're going in there and not competing with David Raya. You're going in there as the guaranteed number one. I think he will end up at Barca. I know people say, like, because Espanyol have a bit of a rivalry with Barca, which I'll be honest, my knowledge of that rivalry isn't like great, so I can't say how big a rivalry it is. But someone explained it as it being like Espanyol's rivalry with Barca is not as big as Barca's rivalry with Espanyol. Like, it's kind of like Declan Rice moving from West Ham to Arsenal, if that makes sense. That was how someone explained it. So I don't know for sure, but Joan Garcia is not going to happen. Then I wanted to talk about this. Remember Sverre Nypan? We spoke about him in January on this channel and in the build-up to January. Norwegian wonder kid that is playing, currently is playing in Norway for Rosenborg. And he was going to go to Villa. That was how we left it. This was in April. Ended up. He never moved anywhere in January. There was this whole thing with him and his dad. Remember, there was this thing with him and his dad where they created a decision matrix as to where he was going to go with all of the pros and cons of the different clubs. And in April, Fabrizio said Aston Villa are closing in on the agreement with Norwegian wonder kid Sverre Nypan on personal terms. The contract's almost agreed, with final details being sorted. Now club-to-club talks follow, with Rosenborg will follow. So whatever, the decision matrix clearly ended up on Aston Villa. But Aston Villa are now, reportedly, according to Ole Saga, not as interested. The interest in Sverre Nypan from Aston Villa has recently decreased, probably because Aston Villa cannot afford to go splashing the cash on 18-year-olds that may or may not work because they missed out on the Champions League. Meanwhile, other clubs, likely including Arsenal and Manchester City, are actively pursuing him. Now, they were the names that were in the mix previously, so it's no surprise that they're still in the mix. I've not actually heard anything directly linking Arsenal to Sverre Nypan since January. So I don't know if it is still on the table. No deal is confirmed and negotiations are ongoing with multiple clubs. Now, I would still like to bring him in. I wanted to bring him in previously. It wasn't a priority, and it still isn't a priority. But I've said, and I said on the video about how what I wanted to do with Arsenal this summer and what I wanted our 25-26 squad to look like. One of the kind of two potential issues with the squad going into next season that I found, one of them was lacking legs in midfield. And Sverre Nypan has the legs in midfield. So he's an alternative option that's obviously young, massive ceiling, carries the ball incredibly well, has an eye for a pass. So I wouldn't mind it. And it's maybe just one to keep an eye on just because we were in there previously and now the Villa thing doesn't seem to be happening. And then finally, this came out over the weekend, yesterday or the day before. Barcelona have opened talks with Thomas Partey's camp over a move this summer, with his future at Arsenal still up in the air. Now, I don't know how much is in that. It does still seem like they're ironing out the final things for him to stay at Arsenal. And of course, that massively divides opinion. There was another article last night from The Athletic. Again, it didn't name anyone in particular, but it then sends social media into a frenzy. And I do think the club are putting Arsenal fans in an unfair position. I do think, there's a lot of noise around it. And I think, as an example, you could bring in a Sverre Nypan. You've got Zubimendi, you've got Declan Rice as sixes. We'll wait and see. But, if he was to move to Barcelona, it would remove that problem that we have. So, yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with that one. But that is pretty much it. That's all that there is for today. No real massive movement. I think, to be honest, Arsenal will move at the start of the next window. Not the next window. The next. There's this. The 1st to the 10th is this window. But like I said, I think a lot of clubs buying and selling are going to be focusing on the Club World Cup clubs, because then that window shuts on the 10th. The window reopens on the 16th. And at that point, the Club World Cup clubs aren't probably going to be that active because they're focusing on playing. They're playing every 3 or 4 days. And so at that point, even more so than like a Euros or a World Cup, it will leave the kind of space for everyone else to have those conversations. And we're not going for a player that will be involved in the Club World Cup as it stands. None of the teams that we're doing business with are in the Club World Cup, other than Bayern if we were to go for Sane. So, yeah, I think actually we probably only end up announcing Zubimendi in the next, now 9 days. And then I think it will pick up more quickly from the 16th. Because also, a lot of players are on international duty. England play on the 7th and the 10th. So, yeah, I would expect more to come in the second part of the window. But as always, you'll be kept updated here. Apologies. I feel like I've been slurring my words at times through this as well. I really need this tooth infection to go away. But it is what it is. Anyway, look, please do like. Please do subscribe. We will be back tomorrow. I'd like to do a live stream tomorrow. No promises, but I would like to. And, other than that, it's a Monday. There is no football to look forward to other than England versus Andorra in 5 days' time. So, enjoy your evening, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.